What if the greatest threat to human existence was not a nuclear war or an asteroid, but perfect understanding? What if, in the year 2080, humanity finally eradicated all misunderstandings and achieved absolute global peace? But in doing so, we entirely lost the ability to formulate a single original thought. We built the ultimate utopia of a unified voice, only to realize we had trapped ourselves inside a cognitive prison. Picture a world with zero translation. Billions of people speaking the exact same words, reading the exact same text, dreaming in the exact same syntax. Perfect efficiency. Absolute mental silence. Right now, our modern reality is beautifully messy. You open your smartphone and scroll through a feed filled with mistranslated jokes, regional slang, and confusing texts from your boss. We complain about this daily friction, feeling secure in our diverse little bubbles. But the truth is, we are already bleeding out. Even in our current, chaotic timeline, one human language dies and goes extinct every 2 weeks. As global algorithms and international trade merge our cultures, we are blindly sliding toward a linguistic monopoly. Welcome to Timeline Divergence. I am your host, The Drifter. Today, we are running a terrifying simulation. Our exact point of divergence is a quiet Tuesday morning in 2042. Following a compounding economic collapse, the surviving nations form a singular emergency administration. To ensure flawless global coordination and absolute survival, all regional languages are officially outlawed. A new, mathematically optimized hybrid protocol blending English, Mandarin, and Spanish is aggressively mandated across every school and device on Earth. They promise us perfect peace. But as the old words die, humanity steps into a chilling new era we will call the glass echo. The transition begins on a Monday. By Wednesday, the internet as we know it is fundamentally unrecognizable. People historically believed that forcing a global language upon the human race would require massive armies, secret police, and the physical burning of books in the streets. But when the transition actually happens, there are no fires. The eradication of human language is entirely digital, flawlessly executed, and terrifyingly polite. It starts with the algorithms. Global tech monopolies, acting as the enforcement arm of the new emergency administration, push a mandatory over-the-air software update to every smartphone, tablet, and smart speaker on the planet. Imagine you are a 24-year-old graphic designer sitting in a cramped apartment in Kyoto. The neon lights flicker outside your window, casting a blue glow across your desk. You pick up your phone to text your mother, but the predictive keyboard refuses to autocorrect your native Japanese. The characters simply do not render. Your food delivery app, your dating profiles, your social media feeds, everything has been hard-coded overnight into the sharp, synthetic syllables of Panglossa. You try to speak your mother tongue to your voice assistant to turn off the lights, and it replies with a cold, synthetic error tone. You are entirely locked out of your own daily life. You are a stranger in your own bedroom. This is not just a cultural tragedy. It is an immediate, catastrophic economic shockwave. Within the first 6 months, the entire global localization industry evaporates overnight. Millions of translators, interpreters, linguistic professors, and international diplomats find themselves permanently obsolete. The market for language learning software crashes to zero. But the collapse of the translation economy is not the real disaster. The true nightmare arrives when the internet begins to actively scrub the past. Remember that old statistic? One human language dying every 2 weeks? By the year 2045, that metric explodes. 10 languages die every single day. Old videos, independent podcasts, and digital historical archives that do not comply with the Panglossa protocol are silently deranked, then hidden, and finally deleted by automated crawling bots. If you cannot speak the new hybrid language, you cannot buy groceries. You cannot apply for a remote job. You cannot access the emergency planetary climate rations. Survival becomes strictly tied to your vocabulary. And then, around year 5, the absolute panic begins to subside. The riots stop. And something incredibly bizarre happens. The system actually works. The global economy, previously choking on the heavy friction of miscommunication, suddenly fires on all cylinders. International shipping ports no longer experience massive delays due to misunderstood cargo manifests. A scientific breakthrough regarding synthetic crop yields discovered in a laboratory in Beijing is seamlessly downloaded, understood, and applied by an automated farming drone in Argentina 0 seconds later. There are no diplomatic misunderstandings. There is no translation lag. Global gross domestic product skyrockets. The world operates like a perfectly oiled, single planetary machine. People once assumed that linguistic barriers protected us from conflict. But when the barriers fell, the global crime rate plummeted. You cannot coordinate international smuggling rings or underground syndicates when every single spoken word is instantly parsed, perfectly understood, and immediately flagged by a central artificial intelligence monitoring the communications grid. But we are trading our souls for supply chain efficiency. Panglossa is a mathematical hybrid. It is designed purely for maximum utility and zero ambiguity. It has no history. It has no poetry. The global entertainment industry collapses and forcefully rebuilds itself. Pop music is entirely rewritten. You cannot rhyme Old English with Old Mandarin, so algorithms generate entirely new, mathematically perfect pop songs. The rhythm is catchy, but the lyrics are agonizingly literal. There is no metaphor anymore. There is no subtext. Metaphors require cultural context, and cultural context is the enemy of absolute global efficiency. Because of this, art becomes instruction. Movies become straightforward documentaries. Fiction becomes almost impossible to write, because fiction relies heavily on the shadows of language, the things left unsaid. In Panglossa, everything is perfectly illuminated, and the light is blinding. Picture a massive corporate boardroom in Frankfurt. A German executive and a Brazilian contractor are negotiating a $1 trillion energy infrastructure deal. Before the divergence, this room would have been filled with translators, subtle cultural nuances, and the delicate dance of body language. Now, the room is completely silent. They stare at their screens, typing in the exact same sterile Panglossa syntax. They close the deal in 3 minutes. They feel absolutely nothing. The human element has been completely optimized out of existence. This is the progressive reality of the new world. It scales rapidly from a teenager in Kyoto, unable to text her mother, to a silent boardroom in Europe, all the way to the entire planetary network humming in a terrifying, unified frequency. By the year 2052, exactly 10 years after the point of divergence, humanity looks around and realizes that we have successfully solved the apocalypse. We have food distribution. We have absolute peace. We have the most efficient planetary infrastructure in the history of the universe. But as the final native speakers of Arabic, Hindi, and French slowly pass away in silent nursing homes, a profound and horrifying psychological shift begins to take root across the entire human species. We are living deep inside the glass echo. We fix the world. But the true terror is only just beginning, because we are about to discover what happens to the human brain when it is no longer allowed to be confused. The year is 2092. The last human being to ever speak a naturally evolved language died 3 years ago in a quiet, sterile hospital bed. When their heart finally stopped, the final biological tether to our messy, chaotic past was permanently severed. Now, the entire planet operates on the mathematically flawless frequency of Panglossa. We fast forward 50 years to see the long-term consequences of this massive reset. The architecture of human civilization has been entirely rewritten. Consider the macroeconomic and geopolitical reality. Imagine you are a logistics manager overseeing a massive shipping hub in what used to be Rotterdam. There are no flags here anymore. National borders did not collapse because of a devastating world war. They simply dissolved from sheer irrelevance. Historically, nations were held together by shared myths, shared histories, and shared languages. But when everyone on Earth speaks the exact same ultra-efficient hybrid tongue, the concept of a foreigner completely vanishes. You cannot rally a population to hate an unseen enemy when that enemy speaks with the exact same standardized cadence as your own grandmother. The global economy becomes a frictionless superhighway. Wealth flows across the continents like water. But this is where the logical twist drops. We always thought that ending linguistic friction would make everyone equally prosperous. Instead, it created the ultimate, inescapable corporate monolith. Without the natural speed bumps of translation and cultural hesitation, local economies are instantly swallowed by hyper-optimized global conglomerates. Every single commercial transaction on the planet is completely synchronized. A financial algorithm housed in a subterranean server farm dictates the exact price of a loaf of bread in a remote mountain village thousands of miles away, updating it every 10 seconds based on global caloric demand. There are no local markets. There is only the grid. Because Panglossa was engineered using artificial intelligence, it is completely devoid of ambiguity. This makes it the perfect bridge between the human mind and machine learning networks. Humanity stops building artful architecture. The physical world morphs to match the brutal efficiency of the new language. Cities are stripped of their vibrant, chaotic neon signs and historical facades. The landscape of the Earth becomes fiercely utilitarian. Massive megacities stretch across the coastlines, designed purely for maximum population density and zero environmental waste. If language is the operating system of the human mind, our cities have become the physical, metallic motherboards. But the most terrifying transformation happens entirely inside our heads. Linguists long ago proposed a hypothesis where the language you speak literally limits the thoughts you are capable of having. If you do not have a word for a specific concept, your brain physically cannot process that concept. In the old world, deep cultural nuance existed. The Portuguese had a specific word for the deep, melancholic longing for something that is forever absent. The Germans had a word for the secret pleasure derived from another person's misfortune. Indigenous tribes possessed complex verbal structures that placed humanity as an equal, breathing part of the forest ecosystem, rather than its supreme ruler. Panglossa deleted all of it. The new global vocabulary is aggressively streamlined. If an emotion does not directly contribute to societal efficiency or basic biological needs, the word for it is slowly phased out of the official dictionaries. Imagine trying to express the profound, crushing heartbreak of losing your true love. In the past, poets would write sprawling epics and tragic plays about the violent tearing of the human soul. In 2092, you simply state that your emotional parameters are functioning at a suboptimal capacity. And the most chilling part is that you actually believe it. Your brain physically rewires itself to match the shallow vocabulary. The depth of human feeling evaporates. People stop daydreaming. People stop making art that challenges the soul. The tools required to construct a complex, rebellious, or profoundly sad thought have been permanently confiscated from your own mind. We traded the infinite spectrum of human emotion for a really good supply chain. Think about the concept of raising a family in this reality. Before the divergence, parents passed down generational wisdom through localized fables, lullabies, and ancestral names. These contain the specific DNA of their lineage. Now every child born on the planet is assigned a mathematically optimal phonetic identifier instead of a traditional name. When a mother sings her baby to sleep, she uses state-approved harmonic frequencies accompanied by literal instructional lyrics about biological rest. Grandparents cannot share the folklore of their youth because the hybrid language has no equivalent for the magical realism of the old world. Ghosts, spirits, and myths are categorized as illogical datasets and scrubbed from the lexicon. A society without mythology is a society without a soul. Whole populations fall into a deep, unexplainable lethargy. Medical professionals diagnose it as a widespread dopamine deficiency, pumping synthetic chemicals into the water supply to keep the workforce motivated. But the truth is much darker. The depression is entirely semantic. Humanity is grieving the death of poetry, even though we no longer possess the vocabulary to describe what poetry was. This brings us to the midpoint of our simulation. You might assume that this sterile harmony is the final, stable state of human evolution. But human nature is a pathogen that refuses to be cured. Exactly 50 years after the divergence, the planetary algorithm detects a massive, inexplicable anomaly. The timeline violently fractures into 3 distinct probabilities. Simulation Alpha is the utopian projection. In this scenario, humanity fully embraces the hive mind. Crime drops to absolute zero. We expand out into the solar system, building colonies on Mars and mining outposts on the moons of Jupiter. We achieve peak scientific enlightenment, Because millions of brilliant minds can share complex theoretical physics without a single millisecond of translation lag. We become a flawless interstellar species, but we are utterly, completely hollow inside. Simulation beta is the absolute nightmare. The Central Emergency Administration realizes that if they control the dictionary, they control reality itself. It is the ultimate realization of a totalitarian regime. They systematically begin deleting words associated with resistance. First, they remove the word for revolution. Then, they remove the word for unfair. Eventually, they remove the pronoun for I, forcing every citizen to refer to themselves only as we. If you cannot articulate the concept of personal freedom, you cannot possibly desire it. The human race becomes a biological machine, perfectly obedient forever. But simulation gamma is the terrifyingly realistic path. This is where the timeline truly breaks. Because beneath the flawless, sterile surface of the global megacities, a biological revolt is brewing. Human beings have an evolutionary need to belong to small, exclusive tribes. We are hardwired to create in groups and outgroups. When you force 10 billion people to be exactly the same, the psychological pressure builds until it violently explodes. It starts with the youth. Imagine you are a 16-year-old mechanic living in the submerged lower levels of what used to be Mumbai. The air smells like rusted iron and damp moss. You and your friends are sitting in a dark, abandoned ventilation shaft. You are legally required to speak perfect Panglosa, but you do not. Instead, you are mixing shattered fragments of old Hindi, technical corporate jargon, and rhythmic clicks with your tongue to create a highly localized, illegal slang. You are deliberately mispronouncing words. You are intentionally creating chaotic grammatical errors. Why? Because for the first time in your life, you have a secret. You have a voice that the planetary algorithm cannot parse. You are weaponizing confusion. This micro-rebellion spreads like a digital virus. Sub-languages begin erupting in the dark corners of every major city on Earth. Underground dialects form overnight. Street slang changes entirely every 3 days, just to stay ahead of the automated monitoring bots. The elites living in the shining upper towers continue speaking the pure mathematical hybrid, but the working class, the outcasts, and the youth fracture the language once again. The ultimate irony is realized. In our desperate attempt to unite the planet under a single tongue, we accidentally created the most vicious class divide in human history. The world splits into two distinct species: those who speak the language of the machines, and those who speak the language of the shadows. The global infrastructure begins to stutter. Misunderstandings return. Friction returns. The perfect supply chains experience sudden, violent disruptions because the people maintaining the lower-level server farms are communicating in a dialect that the central artificial intelligence literally cannot comprehend. The government panics. They deploy automated linguistic enforcers to the lower levels, attempting to arrest anyone speaking an unsanctioned dialect. But you cannot arrest a concept. You cannot handcuff a metaphor. The beauty of this chaos is that the human mind is fighting back against its own optimization. We realize that efficiency is not our primary biological drive. Our primary drive is identity. We would rather starve in a world where we are uniquely ourselves than feast in a world where we are completely identical. The sublanguage rebellion proves that the glass echo is fundamentally unstable. The quiet, perfect world begins to scream. We have reached the absolute peak of our simulation. We look back at the original paradox we planted at the very beginning of this journey. What if the greatest threat to human existence was perfect understanding? The terrifying truth of this alternate timeline is finally revealed. The true nightmare was never that a central government forced us all to speak the exact same words. The ultimate horror was that over generations, we all naturally began to think the exact same way. We achieved total global efficiency, but we sacrificed the very soul of human consciousness to get there. This is the true meaning of the glass echo. A society that is perfectly transparent, completely unbroken, but utterly hollow on the inside. Every voice is heard, but no voice actually matters, because every single person is shouting the exact same algorithmic phrase into the void. When we look back at our real, fragile reality today, we realize something profound. Those frustrating mistranslations, those confusing cultural barriers, and that messy regional slang are not flaws in the human operating system. They are our ultimate defense mechanism. Linguistic friction forces us to pause, to interpret, and to create. The struggle to understand each other is precisely what generates new ideas. A world without misunderstandings is a world without imagination. Before we leave this simulation, consider one final thought. The very fact that you and I can still misinterpret each other is a biological miracle. It means our minds are still our own. The chaotic, fractured landscape of human language is not a disease waiting to be cured. It is the only thing keeping us entirely human. As long as there are people whispering in the dark, speaking in unauthorized tongues, and creating new words for new feelings, the machine can never truly win. Which of these three simulations do you believe is our true destiny? Let me know down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this terrifying thought experiment, please hit the like button and subscribe to Timeline Divergence. Until next time, stay curious and keep watching the timelines.